Yo, what up, Street Talks? Eric Kim. All right, so the next topic of discussion is why education, why is education important, and so forth. So to me, this is something I think about a lot is, what is the point of education, higher education, and so forth. And the nitty gritty is the point of education is to breed free thinkers, free spirits, people who could think on their own. Now, the irony is, most schools, that actually isn't the goal. So it looks like the goal of a lot of modern day society is pretty basic in the sense that the point of modern day education is it's the institution for the sake of the institution, the institution above everything else. So this is basically how the game works. So it looks like in American society, at least, the institution, which is like this, essentially imagine the notion of the corporate, in America, the man, the, consumerist, capitalist enterprise, which kind of, the invisible hand, which kind of moves everything. In education, academia, it's kind of the same things that we have academia or whatever, and there's a difference between like professional academia and scholarship. You could be a plumber and still be a scholar, but to be a tenured academic means that you have to play this academic game. And truth be told, like trying to become a tenured professor and academic at like an Ivy League or like one of these schools is equivalent like trying to become a CEO at like a $1 billion tech company. It's really not that different. There's certain games you gotta play, there are certain rules you gotta play by. I think academia is a little bit more clear in terms of like how to win and play the game, but still it's more similar than dissimilar. And now so this is just based on my personal experiences. It seems the ultimate point of higher education is essentially, I can't really say this too much for higher education, but let me take a step back. So at least when you're just like primary school, right? Like elementary, middle school, high school, whatever. Essentially, it's a tool to teach obedience. A tool to teach obedience for kids not to speak out, to not lash out, for them not to act a fool, and also for kids to sit down, shut up, listen to the teacher, and essentially to become obedient herd animals. And consider, the more you act up, the more you talk up against the teacher, the more you try to stand and run around, the more you're punished. And so you think about it, all kids love to stand, run around, and don't like to sit and pay attention. And that's why I think this notion of like giving kids Ritalin and Adderall and stuff like that, I think is actually one of the worst things that we could do to our children, because children are born to be hyperactive, and the more hyperactive the child, the better. Now, obviously, a hyperactive kid ain't good in school, but it kind of ends up becoming like a beta procrustus, where the question is, is the purpose of a child to become a good student, or is the point of school for children to allow themselves to become all they can be and stuff like that? And so, for example, this is why I'm like kind of a big fan of like the Montessori school idea, where you just kind of let kids run around and do random shit, because that's what kids want to do and like to do. Now, obviously, there's a lot more work on the parents or the school teachers, whatever, but this is why I think, first of all, I do believe that teachers should obviously get paid more, and teachers should be given the same respect as like almost kind of like military personnel. And if you think about it, all schools generally tend to try to distill a kid or a person's thinking to one specific field or idea. But that's not how knowledge and wisdom works. Like, essentially, I think the better goal is you want to become autodidact, which means means by yourself. Didact meaning you dictate for yourself what you want and stuff like that. And that becomes the ultimate, because once you become an autodidact, then you could just pursue all fields of knowledge which are interesting to you. So can you imagine if, Leonardo da Vinci went to Harvard? He'd probably be the most boring square ever, because, he wouldn't have been able to become an engineer, a war tactician, a city planner, a painter, an artist, and stuff like that. And so, I think true genius is, a genius isn't some sort of like demigod who somehow has parents who are half or part gods or gods, and then somehow are thrust into this world with some sort of superhuman ability. No, I think a genius is nothing but a kid with good parents who did not suck out the creativity, the joy, and the randomness and the chaos in the children, but instead allowed the child to become some sort of creative monster, and didn't inhibit their powers, but rather channeled their powers towards some sort of generative, productive, creative, and empowering goals. So when it comes to academia, I mean, first and foremost, I don't think you should ever go into debt for going to school. That's just kind of stupid. And I think in terms of pursuing education, like, it's so trite to say, but really pursue your passion, whatever interests you, and use it to unlearn nonsense that you've been taught in life. And so for me, for my undergrad, I went to UCLA. Yeah, I graduated 2010, I think. Yeah, so almost a decade ago, a decade ago. So I graduated a decade ago. I'm like 32 right now. I graduated when I was 22 or 21, I don't remember. And so one of the biggest benefits I actually had studying sociology was it actually learned how to de-socialize me, to essentially give me a reboot in terms of my brain and my thinking and how I thought about society, and essentially helped me it was my first step into becoming a free spirit. And it's actually funny because I actually did have a brief stint taking a philosophy class, because I'm like, oh, I like philosophy, I like to philosophize. It was a fucking class on logic, and it was the most hateful class I've ever taken. I'm like, I wanted to talk about the meaning of life, and instead, we have to draw out logic in terms of like, math equations. I'm like, yo, this is some bullshit, right? But anyways, so I quickly dropped that. But sociology was great because, like even my class discussions, it was kind of like a Socratic open table where we're able to debate, thoughts about society, meaning of life, and stuff like that. And so it was probably the best thing that I've ever taken. I would encourage everyone to study sociology, and and also philosophy sounds good too, but it seems like it's become this stupid, like, academia chasing thing where you have to talk more nonsense in order to sound smart. But anyways, so shout out to Terry Anderson, Mark Jepson, my two professors in UCLA when I was a student, who helped essentially free my mind. So essentially it's kind of like Matrix vibes, right? You're kind of plugged and jacked into the Matrix. You got that thing that's plugged into your brain, and it's a metaphor for the way that we're generally taught and trained to think in a very singular, closed-minded way. And the point of education, I think, should be to expand your mind, for the teacher to inject more randomness and to incept interesting ideas within you, and actually to bring out the best in you. So I think a teacher in education should kind of be like a turbocharger. Is that like, you start off with, let's say you start off with a ghetto Honda Civic, and you toss in a turbocharger, you're gonna add a lot more horsepower to the thing, even though it's kind of like, our, basic car, right? And so similarly, I think education and teachers should become the turbochargers of the mind, where it could spool up and spin up. That's why I like to call it turbo thoughts, because it just kind of turns things around, just kind of, sometimes you have to fuck up your thinking a little bit and kind of shake it up a little bit in order to think great thoughts. So basically, as a conclusion, let's think that The point of education is for us to increase the turbine